Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. The Caribbean breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine across the pristine beach of the Aurelia Resort and Spa. Adrian Cross stood at the reception desk, his broad shoulders set in a rigid line, as he listened to the apologetic receptionist explain that his name wasn't on the reservation list. His jaw tightened imperceptibly. "I apologize, Mr. Cross, but I can only see Mrs. Cross's reservation," the young receptionist said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "And unfortunately, we're completely booked for the next 2 weeks." Behind him, his wife, Celeste, known to her followers simply as Celeste, adjusted her designer sunglasses with manicured fingers. She stood with her 3 best friends, all decked out in matching Versus swimwear that probably cost more than the average person's monthly salary. "Oh, darling, I must have forgotten to add your name when I made the booking. I did everything so last minute. You know how these things happen." Adrian turned slowly, his gaze falling on the 4 women. The silvery scar above his left eyebrow, a reminder of his past life, glinted in the tropical sunlight. He noticed the subtle exchange of glances between them, the barely concealed smirks. "These things don't just happen, Celeste," he said, his quiet voice carrying an underlying steel that made the receptionist shrink back slightly. Melody Lark let out her trademark high-pitched laugh, the sound grating against Adrian's ears. "Oh my God, Celeste, your husband is so serious all the time. It's just a little mix-up. Just a mix-up," Penelope Frost echoed, adjusting her diamond-encrusted watch. "Though really, Adrian, did you honestly think you'd be staying at the Aurelia? This is a VIP resort, darling." Rowena Swift didn't even try to hide her contempt. "Why don't you just go back to designing your little buildings? Leave the luxury vacations to those who can appreciate them." Their laughter echoed across the marble-floored lobby, drawing curious glances from other guests. Adrian stood perfectly still, his dark eyes taking in every detail of the scene before him. He saw how Celeste's hand trembled slightly as she brought her champagne glass to her lips, betraying the nervousness beneath her confident exterior. He noticed the way Glimmer kept checking her phone, as if waiting for a message. "Celeste, is your voice now devoid of any emotion? When did you start planning this trip?" he asked. His wife's perfectly painted lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Does it matter, darling? What matters is that there's been a terrible mistake. 3 months ago, you started taking more private calls. 2 months ago, your shopping habits changed. New lingerie, new perfume. 6 weeks ago, you changed your passwords. 3 weeks ago, you booked this trip." The smile froze on Celeste's face. Melody stopped laughing as Glimmer's hand tightened around her phone. "You've been planning this for months," Adrian continued, each word measured and precise. "This isn't a mistake. This is deliberate. Now listen here." Rowena Swift began to speak, but Adrian cut her off with a look that made her step back. "I don't need to listen to anything more," he said. He turned back to the reception desk, picked up his passport, and slipped it into his jacket pocket, leaving his luggage behind. "Adrian, wait," Celeste called out, a note of panic creeping into her voice, but he was already walking away, each measured, controlled step taking him further from the facade of his marriage, and closer to what he'd suspected for months. His grandmother had always told him that patience was a virtue, though she'd never mentioned that it could also be a weapon. In the distance, a hawk circled overhead, its keen eyes surveying the scene below. Adrian watched it for a moment, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He pulled out his phone, ignored the notification showing 63 missed calls from Celeste over the past week, and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "It's time," he said when the line connected. A gruff but clear voice answered. "About damn time, kid. You remember what I taught you." Adrian's fingers traced the scar above his eyebrow. "Strike once. Strike hard. Leave nothing standing. Good boy. Where are you?" "The Bahamas. A Meridian resort. There's nowhere to run. came the reply, accompanied by a low chuckle. Perfect. Islands are good. There's nowhere to run. I'll make some calls. Adrian ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. His wife and her friends thought they'd witnessed his humiliation. They thought they'd seen him break. They were wrong. They had just witnessed the moment he stopped holding back. In the garden, a security camera pivoted to follow his movement. Adrian noticed it, just as he noticed everything. He had spent years playing the role of the quiet, successful architect, the patient husband who overlooked his wife's excessive spending and attention-seeking behavior. He'd built his reputation carefully, brick by brick, just as he'd built his buildings. But underneath that facade lay another man entirely, a man who had fought his way up from nothing, a man who had learned early that the world shows no mercy to the weak. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. Patience, Adrian. The cobra doesn't strike at the first sign of movement. It waits until the perfect moment. The perfect moment had arrived. Celeste and her friends had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They'd assumed he was weak. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Later that afternoon, the sun blazed across the resort's private beach as Celeste and her friends sprawled on designer loungers, their laughter carrying across the sand. Maxwell Rivers stepped out of a sleek speedboat, his tailored linen shirt unbuttoned just enough to show off his tan chest. He ran a hand through his artfully tousled hair and shot a practiced smile at the group of women. "Ladies, I hope I haven't kept you waiting too long," he called out as he strode toward them. Celeste sat up, adjusting her bikini top with deliberate slowness. "Maxwell, darling, you're right on time," she said. Glimmer, Maxwell's sister, rolled her eyes behind her sunglasses. "You're always so dramatic with your entrances, little brother. Can't help putting on a show." "Sis," Maxwell replied, his eyes never leaving Celeste, especially with such an appreciative audience before him. Rowena Swift leaned forward, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. "Speaking of shows, you should have seen Adrian's face when he realized he wasn't on the guest list. Priceless." "Oh my God, yes," Melody Lark chimed in, her laugh piercing the air. "He just stood there, trying to look all dignified, like, hello. You've been dumped, honey." Maxwell dropped onto the lounger beside Celeste, pulling her close. "I wish I'd been here to see it, though I suppose watching security footage will have to do." Trailing her fingers along Maxwell's arm, Celeste said, "All these years of playing the perfect husband, and he couldn't even manage his scene. Just walked away like the nobody he is." Meanwhile, in a small village 20 minutes from the resort, Adrian sat in a dimly lit room facing an elderly woman whose dark eyes seemed to pierce right through him. At Ash's cottage, which smelled of incense and herbs with walls lined by books and curious artifacts, the woman said, "You bring darkness with you," while studying the photograph Adrian had placed on the table between them. The photo showed Celeste and Maxwell at a charity gala 3 months ago, their bodies turned toward each other despite standing apart. "I bring truth," Adrian corrected steadily, adding, "and I need your assistance." Ashes picked up the photo, her weathered fingers tracing its edges. "This woman has betrayed you, and this man." She tapped Maxwell's image. "He thinks himself clever, but he's a snake who has not yet learned to fear retribution." Adrian reached into his jacket and drew a thick folder. "I need access to certain channels, discreet ones. I understand you have connections that might be useful." "Connections?" Ashes laughed dryly. "Young man, in these islands information flows like the tides. One must simply know where to stand to catch what floats past." She opened the folder, her eyebrows rising slightly at its contents. "These are complex arrangements you've made." "I've had time to prepare," Adrian said, pulling out his phone to show her a series of offshore account numbers. "Everything is in place. I just need the right people to help set things in motion." "And what about your grandmother's wish? The one that kept you bound to this marriage?" Ashes asked. Adrian's hand went to his scar. "My grandmother wanted me to be happy, to have status through marriage. She never knew what Celeste really was. And now she's gone, and with her, any obligation I had to maintain this facade. Back at the resort, Maxwell was regaling the group with an impression of Adrian's walking style, his movements exaggerated and stiff. Look at me. I'm Adrian Cross, famous architect. I design buildings because I can't design a personality. The women howled with laughter, and Celeste clutched her sides. Stop, stop. You're killing me. Oh, wait. Here's Adrian trying to be intimidating. Maxwell said, straightening his spine and lowering his voice to a growl. Celeste, you've been planning this for months. Like, duh. Did he really think you loved him? Celeste wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. God, no. He was just so convenient, rich enough to fund my lifestyle, boring enough to never question my stories about girls, trips, and fashion emergencies. She took a sip of champagne. Though I have to admit, he did have some moments where he seemed different. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me, and it felt like he could see right through me. Please, Glimmer scoffed. The man designs buildings for a living. He probably just had graph paper on his mind. At Ash's cottage, the old woman was making a series of phone calls, speaking rapidly in several different languages. Adrian sat quietly, observing everything, memorizing names and details as they were mentioned. It is done. Ashes finally declared as she set down her ancient Nokia phone. The channels are open. But remember, young man, once you step onto this path, there is no turning back. Adrian stood, straightening his jacket. The time for turning back ended the moment you made your choice. He placed an envelope on the table. Thank you for your help. Wait. Ashes called as he reached the door. Your grandmother. She taught you patience, yes. But who taught you to fight? A small smile played at Adrian's lips. That's a story for another time. For now, let's just say I learned from the best. As Adrian stepped out of the cottage, his phone buzzed. The number of missed calls from Celeste had reached 78, each one a testament to her growing unease and the realization that perhaps she had miscalculated. She had no idea how right she was. In a local fishing village, Damon, a weathered fisherman with calloused hands that spoke of decades at sea, hunched over hand-drawn maps spread across a rough wooden table. The steady sound of waves provided a backdrop to their conversation. These currents, Damon traced a finger along invisible lines between the islands. They change with the moon. What is safe passage today becomes treacherous tomorrow. Adrian nodded, making notes in a small black notebook. And the resort's supply routes. Damon replied, marking them with expert precision. The large boats use the deep water to the east. Small craft, like the one your wife's new man arrived in. They prefer the western approach. And security. Coast Guard patrols are predictable. Resort security, though. They care only about what they can see from the beach. Adrian's phone vibrated again. The missed calls from Celeste now numbered 82. He silenced it without looking at the screen. Meanwhile, at the resort, the atmosphere had shifted. Celeste paced her luxury suite, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. He's planning something, she muttered, checking her phone for the 100th time. Adrian doesn't just disappear. He doesn't just walk away, darling. You're being paranoid. Maxwell drooled from his position on the plush sofa. The man designs houses for a living. What's he going to do? Drop some angry blueprints? Melody snorted champagne through her nose at that, though her laughter sounded forced. Glimmer shot her brother a warning look. You don't know him like I do. There were times, moments when I'd catch glimpses of something else beneath that quiet exterior. Something dangerous. Oh, please, Rowena interjected, moving closer to the window and scanning the darkening gardens. The man let you max out your credit cards without a word. He's probably crying in some budget hotel right now. A sharp knock at the door made them all jump. A resort staff member entered with an envelope. Mrs. Cross. This was left for you at reception. Celeste snatched the envelope and tore it open. Inside was a single photograph of her and Maxwell at the charity gala, the same one Adrian had shown Ashes. Across it, in Adrian's precise architect's handwriting, were the words, "I've known for months." "Darn," Maxwell muttered, his confident facade cracking slightly. "How did he?" "It doesn't matter," Celeste snapped, though her hand shook as she crumpled the photo. "He's just trying to scare us. Adrian doesn't have it in him to do anything else." In a secluded cave far from the resort's manicured beaches, Adrian sat alone on the sand, his laptop glowing in the gathering darkness as he made the final preparations. On the screen, a complex web of financial transactions awaited his authorization. Years of careful planning, of maintaining his cover as nothing more than a successful architect, had led to this moment. His phone lit up with another call from Celeste-83 now, but he let it ring. A memory surfaced, his grandmother on her deathbed, gripping his hand with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll find happiness, Adrian. Promise me you'll settle down, make a good life." He had promised, and for years he kept that promise, suppressing his true nature, playing the role of the patient, understanding husband, even as he watched Celeste's mask slip and noticed the signs of her infidelity. He'd maintained his facade, but his grandmother was gone now, and with her, the last restraint that had held him back. His laptop flashed with an incoming email, contact details for his old network preserved from his days before architecture, when he'd learned lessons far more valuable than design principles. Names, numbers, favors waiting to be called in. Adrian began to type, his fingers moving with practiced precision. Each message was carefully crafted, each recipient chosen with purpose. The pieces were falling into place. In her suite, Celeste's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "The cobra doesn't strike at the first sign of movement. It waits for the perfect moment." She dropped the phone as if it had burned her. "What is it?" Maxwell demanded, but Celeste couldn't find the words to explain, her eyes filling with unshed tears. The message reminded her of something Adrian had once said, years ago, when she had asked about his scar. He had smiled his quiet smile and said that his grandmother had taught him the value of patience. She hadn't understood then, but she was beginning to understand now. As the night deepened, Adrian closed his laptop and stood, brushing sand from his clothes. Everything was in place. Tomorrow, the first phase would begin. Celeste, Maxwell, and their accomplices thought they'd witnessed his humiliation. They thought they'd seen him break. What they had actually seen was the moment he stopped holding back, the moment the architect's facade cracked, revealing the fighter beneath. His grandmother had wanted him to find happiness, but instead he had found purpose. The cobra was done waiting. It was time to strike. Celeste's phone buzzed at 7 a.m., displaying her private banker's number. She stretched lazily in her resort suite, still basking in the satisfaction of yesterday's triumph over Adrian. "Charles, darling, isn't it a bit early?" Charles's voice cracked with tension. "There's been a situation with your accounts." Celeste sat up, her manicured hand clutching the Egyptian cotton sheets. "What kind of situation?" she asked. "They're frozen. All of them. Even your trust fund." Charles said. "What?" She jumped out of bed, nearly knocking over her champagne glass from last night. "That's impossible." "Unfreeze them," Charles insisted. "I can't. The orders came from multiple regulatory bodies. There are allegations." "Allegations of what?" "Money laundering, tax evasion, securities fraud." Celeste's voice rose. "Don't be ridiculous. Just fix it, Mrs. Cross." Charles replied, adding, "These orders are beyond my authority. They're citing evidence dating back years." Celeste ended the call, her hand shaking as she tried to access her banking apps. Each attempt met with the same message. Account access restricted pending investigation. A knock at the door made her jump. It was Maxwell Rivers, his usual smooth demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. "My properties," he gasped, All my development projects. They're being audited. The investors are pulling out. The banks are calling in loans. What? How? She asked. Someone's been feeding information to the SEC. Years of private records, offshore accounts, everything. Maxwell ran his hands through his disheveled hair. It's him. It has to be. Celeste laughed bitterly. But Maxwell, he's an architect. He doesn't have this kind of power. Then explain this. Maxwell thrust his phone at her. On the screen, his company's stock price showed a straight downward line. Someone's been shorting our stocks, exposing our dealings to regulatory bodies. My entire empire is collapsing. In a sleek office building across the island, Adrian sat across from a sharply featured woman in her 40s. The dominoes are falling exactly as you predicted, she said, sliding a tablet across the desk. Celeste's accounts are locked. Maxwell's empire is crumbling. And the evidence trail leads everywhere except back to you. Adrian studied the financial reports on the screen. The offshore accounts traced back to their own shell companies. Corella's lips curved into a predatory smile. I must admit, when you hired me, I thought this was just another divorce case. But this? She gestured at the mounting evidence of Maxwell and Celeste's financial misdeeds. This is art. You sound impressed. I am, he replied. 5 years ago, my husband pulled something similar to what Maxwell did to you. Corella's eyes hardened. He walked away clean while I rebuilt my life from scratch, watching you dismantle their world piece by piece. It's satisfying. Adrian set down the tablet. This is just the beginning. Back at the resort, Celeste paced her suite while Maxwell argued with his lawyers on the phone. Glimmer burst in without knocking. What the hell did you do? She demanded, waving her phone at her brother. My foundation's accounts are frozen because of their connection to your companies. Maxwell shouted. I didn't do anything. This is all him, that quiet, pathetic architect you thought was such an easy mark. Easy mark? Glimmer laughed bitterly. Look around you. He's destroying us all. And you're telling me he's just an architect. Celeste sank onto the couch, her designer dress beginning to crumble. There were moments. Things I noticed but ignored. The way he'd watch us sometimes, like he was cataloging everything. How he always seemed to know about business dealings he shouldn't have. She cried. God, what have we done? Maxwell stuttered. What we've done. Glimmer snorted. Don't underestimate him. And now we're paying for it. In his temporary office, Adrian received another update from his financial team. The complex web of transactions he'd spent years preparing was executing flawlessly. Each move triggered another, exposing fraudulent dealings, questionable partnerships, and tax evasion schemes. His phone buzzed with a message from Corella. Maxwell just tried to access his emergency funds in the accounts. Adrian typed back, let him. Moments later, his phone lit up with Maxwell's panicked voice message. You think you can do this to me? I built this empire. I own half of. Oh God, the accounts. They're empty. How did you? What are you? Adrian deleted the message without replying. On his laptop, he pulled up a video feed showing Celeste's suite at the resort. She sat amidst scattered financial documents, her composed facade cracking as she desperately tried to find some account, a resource that wasn't compromised. Sir, his assistant announced through the intercom, Ms. Matthews is here with the next phase of documents. Send her in. Corella entered, carrying a thick folder. The media packets are ready. Shall we begin the next phase? Adrian nodded as he turned back to the video feed. He watched as Celeste broke down, screaming at Maxwell, who was himself shouting into his phone at yet another deserting investor. They had thought him weak, nothing more than the quiet architect they could discard at will. Now they would learn what he really was, a predator who had patiently waited for the perfect moment to strike. And this was just the beginning. The headlines splashed across social media like wildfire. Lifestyle influencers' perfect lives were exposed as fraud, and photos showed Celeste and Maxwell in intimate moments. More damaging were the screenshots of Celeste's private messages mocking her followers, revealing the cynical manipulation behind her carefully curated image. "Make it stop," Celeste screamed, hurling her phone across the resort suite. It hit the wall just as another notification chimed on her laptop. Another expose. Another piece of my life ripped apart and displayed for public consumption. Maxwell stormed in, his face ashen. "Have you seen the business papers? They're calling me a fraud. A Ponzi scheme operator." He grabbed a bottle of scotch without bothering with a glass. "They have documents going back years. Internal emails, bank transfers, everything." "How?" Celeste demanded as she grabbed her tablet, scrolling through the endless stream of revelations. "These photos." There were no photographers around. "I would have noticed. Local tourists," Glimmer said from the doorway, her own phone clutched in her manicured hand. "All paid in cash. They've been watching us since we arrived," she added bitterly. "God, we were so busy laughing at him that we never noticed we were the ones being played." Across the island, in Ash's dimly lit cottage, Adrian watched the chaos unfold on multiple screens. The old woman moved quietly behind him, brewing tea in ancient copper pots. The media vultures circled as she set a cup beside him. "You have given them quite a feast. They're doing exactly what I knew they would." Adrian's eyes tracked the trending topics as he watched Celeste's carefully built influencer empire crumble in real time. Humans love to tear down what they once worshipped, and the evidence, all authentic, makes it so devastating, he thought. He pulled up another screen showing Maxwell's company stock free-falling. "They can't claim implication or forgery. Everything is real," he noted. "Their mockery, their cruelty, their fraud. I just made sure the right people saw it." Back at the resort, Rowena stared at her phone in horror as her own social media following plummeted. Comments poured in, condemning her association with Celeste. "I have to distance myself," she muttered, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she tried to delete years of incriminating posts. "I can't let her drag me down too. It's too late." Glimmer snapped as she watched her own carefully cultivated social image dissolve. "He's not just exposing them. He's exposing all of us. Everything we've done. Everyone we stepped on to get here." Melody's trademark laugh was nowhere to be heard as she burst into the room. "The charity foundation. They are saying we embezzled funds and used donations for personal expenses." Maxwell snarled, pacing the room like a caged animal. "Because you did," he added, and somehow he knew. He knew everything. Celeste sat amid the wreckage of her life, watching her follower count drop by thousands each hour. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages, not from supporters, but from sponsors rapidly severing ties, from journalists seeking comments, from angry followers demanding explanations. "I've tried calling my family," she whispered, "but they won't answer. My own mother sent a text saying she's disappointed in the person I've become." Makeup streaked down her face as she asked, "How did we not see this coming? How did we not know what he was capable of?" In his temporary command center, Adrian reviewed the next batch of revelations with Corella. The lawyer's eyes gleamed as she assembled more evidence packets for release. "The timing is perfect," she said, organizing documents. "Each revelation builds on the last, leaving no room for you to recover or rebuild your narrative. Public opinion is completely turned. Your cruelty, Maxwell's fraud, and your friend's complicity form the perfect storm of influencer corruption and financial crime. People are furious at being deceived." Adrian's phone buzzed with a notification. He pulled up a video feed showing Celeste attempting to leave the resort, only to be confronted by a wall of reporters. Their questions pierced the air like arrows. "Mrs. Cross, did you really fake your charity work? Mr. Montgomery, what do you say to investors who've lost everything? Is it true your entire relationship was a sham?" Through the cameras, Adrian watched Celeste crumble under the assault, her designer dress and perfect makeup now a parody of the image she had worked so hard to maintain. Maxwell tried to shield her from the cameras, But his own facade was cracking, the smooth businessman replaced by a desperate, cornered fraud. "Sir," his assistant interrupted. "Matthews says it's time for the next phase." Adrian nodded, turning back to his screens. In one window, Rowena frantically tried to salvage her reputation with apologies that only drew more scorn. In another, Glimmer argued with her charitable foundations board, watching her social status evaporate. And in a third, Melody sat alone in her room, her phone dark and silent. No one left to laugh with. They had mocked him, humiliated him, and thought him weak. Now they were learning the truth, that beneath the quiet architect's exterior lay a man who had spent years preparing for this moment, a predator who had studied every weakness, and he was far from finished. Maxwell Rivers slammed his fist into the resort room wall, barely registering the pain as plaster cracked. "I want him dead. Do you understand me? Dead," he roared. His men, local muscle hired through increasingly desperate connections, shifted uncomfortably. Their leader, a scared man named Victor, cleared his throat. Maxwell then yanked off his Rolex. "Take it. It's worth 50,000. Find him. Hear him. Kill him. I don't care. Just make him stop." In his private villa on the other side of the island, Adrian watched the exchange through hidden cameras, his expression unchanged as he listened to Maxwell order his death. A soft knock at the door preceded Viper's entrance, a lean, weathered man whose movements spoke of practiced violence. "Your wife's new friend is getting desperate," Viper observed as he dropped into a chair. "Victor's crew, small-time enforcers who usually handle tourist scams and petty protection rackets, want me to handle it." Maxwell asked. "No, I'll deal with them myself," Adrian said, rolling his shoulders. It's time they learned who they're really dealing with. Viper's eyes gleamed. The architect is ready to get his hands dirty again. As Adrian moved, the scar above his eye caught the light. "You taught me better than that," he said. "That scar, your first lesson in never underestimating an opponent, and my last lesson in being unprepared." Meanwhile, Celeste paced her suite, her phone open to Adrian's contact. 67 deleted messages mocked her from the screen. "Please," she whispered as she recorded another voice message. "Adrian, we can talk about this. It was all a misunderstanding. I never meant to." The message fell into silence. Outside her window, reporters still camped in the resort gardens, their cameras ready. A commotion in the hallway drew her attention. Glimmer burst in, her designer dress torn and mascara streaking her face. "They're charging us with real charges. Fraud. Money laundering. Conspiracy. They're saying a minimum of 10 years, she gasped. "What? No, that's impossible. Adrian's just trying to scare us." "Wake up." Glimmer grabbed her shoulders. "Your husband isn't who we thought he was. The quiet architect. It was all an act." In the villa's private gym, Adrian moved through combat forms with fluid grace, each strike precise and measured. Viper watched from the doorway, critiquing his technique. "Your skills haven't rusted. You've been practicing. 3 hours every morning before the office." "Maintaining the architect's facade doesn't mean losing my edge," Adrian replied. An alert blinked on his phone. Victor's crew was on the move, having tracked him to a beachfront cafe he frequented. "Shall we give them a proper welcome?" Viper asked. Adrian's lips curved slightly. "Let's remind them why I survived the circuit." The confrontation was brief and brutal. Victor's men found Adrian alone on a secluded beach path, their confidence lasting exactly 12 seconds, the time it took for him to disable the first 3 attackers. Victor himself lasted longer, managing to graze Adrian's cheek before finding himself on his knees, his arm twisted at an impossible angle. "Mr. Darby sent us," Victor gasped. "I know what he paid you for." Adrian's voice was conversational, even as he applied more pressure. "Now deliver a message back. Tell him I'm not the man he thought I was. Tell him what you saw here." Victor stuttered. "What are you?" Something he should have feared from the beginning. Adrian replied. You just never bothered to look past the surface. That was your mistake. You saw the architect, the quiet husband, and thought you saw weakness. The guards are giving us privacy. Unlike you, I understand the value of loyal allies. He crouched beside Victor. Everything you built was a lie. Your success, your reputation, your relationships, all built on fraud and manipulation. I just helped it collapse under its own weight. Footsteps approached. Viper emerged from the shadows, his presence a silent threat. The car's ready, he told Adrian. Celeste's being brought in for questioning now. In the police station's interview room, Celeste faced her own reckoning as Detective Chan spread photographs across the table, evidence of years of financial fraud, tax evasion, and charity scams. Mrs. Cross, did you really fake your charity work? Detective Chan's voice was professional but cold. I want my lawyer. Celeste whispered. Your fourth one. They keep quitting. The door opened, and Adrian entered, followed by Corella. Celeste's breath caught. Adrian, please, she pleaded. He ignored her and addressed Detective Chan. Ms. Matthews has additional documentation you'll want to see. Corella opened her briefcase and extracted files. Bank records showing systematic fraud dating back 5 years, emails discussing tax evasion schemes, and text messages coordinating witness intimidation. Those were private. Celeste protested. Privacy is a privilege, like trust, like loyalty, Adrian said, finally looking at her. You sacrifice those privileges when you choose deception over truth. I never meant to get caught. His voice remained level. To face consequences, to lose everything you stole and lied for. He placed another file on the table. Your grandmother's inheritance, the money you embezzled from her estate while I watched, waiting, gathering evidence. She wanted me to find happiness. Instead, I found truth. Adrian, we can still, Celeste began, but he interrupted. No, we can't. You chose your path, and now you'll walk it to the end. Detective Chun cleared his throat. Mrs. Cross, based on this evidence, we're charging you with multiple felony counts. The words washed over her as she stared at Adrian, seeing him clearly for the first time, not as the quiet architect she had dismissed, but as a predator who had patiently waited to strike. Later in the courthouse, Adrian watched as both Celeste and Maxwell faced retribution. Their lawyers looked defeated, crushed under the weight of evidence. Glimmer sat in the gallery, her own legal troubles evident in her subdued appearance. Rowena sat quietly, her legal issues mounting after having fled the country ahead of her own indictment, and Melody sat alone, served with papers for her role in the charity fraud. The judge's voice rang out. Based on the overwhelming evidence and the serious nature of these crimes, bail is denied for both defendants. As they were led away, Celeste looked back one last time. Adrian met her gaze with cold indifference. She saw no anger, no hatred, just the absolute certainty of justice being served. The woman who had once mocked him now shuffled in prison clothes, and the man who had tried to steal his life now faced years behind bars. Their empires, built on lies, had crumbled to dust, and Adrian, the architect they had underestimated, stood amid the ruins, his revenge complete. Room 412 of the Palm Grove bore no resemblance to Celeste's luxurious resort suite. Paint peeled from the walls, the air conditioner rattled, and the bedspread bore mysterious stains. Celeste sat on the sagging mattress, staring at her phone's black screen. No notifications, no messages, no calls. She pressed the power button again, watching it light up with her last message to Adrian. Please, we need to talk. I can explain everything. The silence that followed echoed louder than any response could. A cockroach scuttled across the floor, making her jump. She had been reduced to this, hiding in a budget hotel on the outskirts of town, her designer clothes traded for off-the-rack basics, her credit cards nothing more than useless plastic. The TV droned in the background with another news report about her downfall. Former influencer Celeste Cross faces multiple allegations of fraud and tax evasion. Sources close to the investigation suggested the evidence against her was substantial. She hurled the remote at the screen, missing by inches as the newsreader continued relentlessly. Meanwhile, her lover Maxwell remained in custody as investigators uncovered more details about their financial schemes. A knock at the door made her freeze. "Who is it?" she asked. A bored voice replied, "Room service." Celeste yanked open the door to find a young woman with a cleaning cart. The girl's eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with contempt. "Oh my God, you're her. That fake influencer. The one who—" the girl began, pulling out her phone. Celeste slammed the door shut, her heart pounding. They were everywhere, watching, judging, documenting her fall. She slid down against the door, burying her face in her hands. Across town, in his command center, Adrian reviewed the latest reports from Corella. "The prosecution has everything they need," the lawyer said, spreading documents across his desk. Bank records, correspondence, witness statements, airtight evidence for both criminal and civil cases. And Maxwell, singing like a bird to save himself, had implicated Celeste in everything, trying to paint himself as a victim of her manipulation. Corella's lips curved. "It won't help him, but it's destroying what's left of your relationship." Adrian nodded, pulling up surveillance footage of Celeste's hotel, her family still refusing contact. Her mother's statement to the press was particularly damning, calling her behavior a disgrace to the family name and suggesting she seek professional help. On another screen, social media feeds scrolled past as Celeste's former followers dissected her fall with savage commentary, sharing old posts with new context that exposed years of lies and manipulation. "Mr. Darby," Viper entered with a tablet in hand. "You should see this," he said. The screen showed Celeste attempting to visit her old shopping haunts, only to be turned away. Designer boutiques that once welcomed her now had locked doors. Restaurants that once accepted reservations now refused them. She tried accessing her backup accounts, the ones she thought were hidden. "I found those months ago," Corella added, "along with the offshore transfers, the shell companies, the fake charity donations. She's running out of options." Viper observed. "People like her, they're not built for isolation." In her hotel room, Celeste paced like a caged animal, her phone buzzing with a message from Maxwell's lawyer. "Client has provided additional testimony. Advise immediate cooperation with authorities." "That scoundrel," she hissed after everything, dialing her mother's number again only to reach voicemail. Her father's phone was blocked. Her sister's Instagram showed a new post. "Sometimes toxic people wear designer labels. #no contract, #boundaries." The isolation crushed in on her. No friends, no family, no followers. Her carefully constructed world had been dismantled piece by piece, leaving her alone with the reality of who she truly was. A notification popped up. Someone had tagged her in a video. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. There she was at the resort check-in, laughing as Adrian walked away. The comments were brutal. "Look at her smirking while destroying her husband's life. Karma is beautiful. She deserves everything happening to her." In his office, Adrian watched Celeste's deterioration through multiple feeds. Her expensive makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. Her designer clothes couldn't mask her desperation. "Sir," his assistant interrupted, "the final evidence package is ready." Adrian took the file, reviewing its contents. Bank statements, text messages, emails, a complete record of Celeste's betrayals, not just of him, but of everyone who had trusted her. "Send it to the prosecutors, everything," he instructed. Corella raised an eyebrow. "That's far more than they need for a conviction." "This isn't just about legal punishment," Adrian said coldly. "It's about making sure she understands exactly what she is, what she's done, and why she deserves everything that's happening to her." In her hotel room, Celeste's phone buzzed with another notification, a video compilation. Her mocking posts about authentic living, juxtaposed with evidence of her lies, her charity work exposed as tax fraud, her perfect marriage revealed as a sham. She hurled the phone across the room, but the truth followed her. Each notification, each news report, each rejected call stripped away another layer of her facade until nothing remained but the hollow shell beneath. The woman who once commanded attention now couldn't bear to be seen. The influencer who built her life on appearances now hid from mirrors. The social butterfly who thrived on connection now flinched at human contact. Adrian's revenge wasn't just the destruction of her wealth or status. It was forcing her to see herself through the eyes of those she deceived. Each revelation was a crack in her self-image. Each exposed lie another blow to her carefully constructed identity. She was finally learning what true isolation felt like, what it meant to be powerless, to be the object of contempt rather than admiration. And Adrian, watching through his network of surveillance, felt no satisfaction in her pain. This wasn't about pleasure. It was about justice, cold and absolute. The serpent's strike had been deadly precise, and the venom was only beginning to take effect. Maxwell Rivers' bail hearing should have been routine. Instead, it became the stage for his final confrontation with Adrian. The courthouse corridor stretched before Maxwell as he was led out in handcuffs, his designer suit once immaculate now hanging loose on his frame after weeks in custody. His eyes darted nervously, searching for threats and shadows. From an alcove, Adrian stepped out, his presence freezing Maxwell in place. The guards subtly paid to look the other way. "Move back, you," Adrian commanded. Maxwell's voice cracked. "You've destroyed everything." "No," Adrian replied softly. "You did that yourself. I just exposed what was already there." Maxwell lunged forward, his handcuffs rattling. "I'll kill you," he shouted. Adrian didn't flinch. His movements were fluid and practiced. With one precise step forward, he struck. Maxwell crumpled, gasping. 5 points of contact. Adrian explained calmly as Maxwell struggled to breathe. "Pressure points I learned in the circuit. The pain will fade in an hour, but the lesson will last much longer." Maxwell sputtered. "What are you?" "What I've always been. You just never bothered to look past the surface," Adrian said, straightening his jacket. "That was your mistake. You saw the architect, the quiet husband, and thought you saw weakness. The guards are giving us privacy. Unlike you, I understand the value of loyal allies." He crouched beside Maxwell. "Everything you built was a lie. Your success, your reputation, your relationships, all built on fraud and manipulation. I just helped it collapse under its own weight." Footsteps approached. Viper emerged from the shadows, his presence a silent threat. "The car's ready," he told Adrian. "Celeste's being brought in for questioning now." 1 year later, Adrian stood on his private beach, the same ocean before him, but with everything else transformed. His architectural firm had expanded, now specializing in sustainable community development. His reputation had grown not from social media manipulation, but from genuine achievement. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Socialite Celeste Cross sentenced to 12 years for fraud and tax evasion. Another alert read, real estate mogul Maxwell Rivers faces a 20-year term. He closed the notifications, opening instead photos of his latest project, a community center providing opportunities for underprivileged youth. The funding came from his legitimate success, not the schemes and frauds that had destroyed Celeste and Maxwell. Viper approached, carrying reports. Glimmer's appeal was denied. She's facing 5 years. Rowena's extradition hearing is next week. And Melody. She's working double shifts at a diner in Ohio. Changed her name, but she can't escape her past. Social media never forgets. Adrian nodded as he reviewed the documents. Each page represented another piece of justice served, another consequence delivered. His assistant arrived with more updates. "Sir, the board approved the expansion. 3 new community projects, fully funded." "Good," Adrian said as he signed the authorizations. "Make sure the legal team reviews everything. We build on solid foundations here. The irony wasn't lost on him. Celeste had built her life on appearances, Maxwell on manipulation, but he had built on truth, hard, uncompromising truth, and survived their betrayal stronger than ever. A letter had arrived from Celeste, sent from prison. He read it without expression. Adrian, I understand now what you are. What I did, the person I became. My cell gives me time to think, to remember the signs I ignored. You were never weak, never blind. You sought everything, waited, planned. I lost more than wealth and freedom. I lost myself. Now I'm forced to face who I really am. Adrian placed the letter in a file marked closed, alongside reports of Maxwell's prison adjustment, Glimmer's failed appeals, Rowena's international legal troubles, and Melody's desperate attempts to rebuild her life under a new identity. A corporate update soon arrived. All legal proceedings concluded, all assets secured, all loose ends tied. His revenge wasn't just complete, it was absolute. The beach house that had once witnessed his humiliation now stood as a symbol of his triumph, and the ocean that had reflected their mockery now mirrored his success. A hawk soared overhead, free and powerful. Adrian watched it glide, remembering the man he had been, the mask he had worn, and the patience he had maintained. The serpent had shed its skin, revealing not weakness but deadly strength. His grandmother had wished for his happiness. He had found something better: truth, justice, and the power to enforce both. In the end, he had lost nothing that mattered and gained everything that did. His revenge hadn't consumed him. It had refined him, burned away pretense, leaving only pure purpose. The man who had walked away from that resort a year ago had been playing a role. The man who stood here now was authentic, powerful, uncompromising. The architect had built something greater than buildings. He had constructed justice itself, precise and inevitable. And in the wreckage of those who had wronged him, he found not satisfaction, but completion. The serpent had struck, the venom had worked, and now he was free, not just to live, but to thrive. Not just to succeed, but to make a difference. The story that began with betrayal ended not with mere revenge, but with transformation. Adrian Cross, the man they had once mistaken for weak, now stood revealed as what he had always been: a force of nature, patient yet unstoppable, brutal yet just. The serpent had taken flight. 10 years later, Adrian reviewed the latest proposals for his global sustainable architecture initiative. At 50, he had maintained his imposing physique, a habit from his fighting days that served him well in the corporate arena. The scar above his left eyebrow remained, though his dark hair now carried distinguished streaks of silver. His office, occupying the top floor of the Cross Innovation Center, reflected his evolution. Clean lines merged with sustainable materials, creating a space that balanced power with purpose. Awards lined one wall, not for social media influence or shallow achievements, but for revolutionary architectural designs and humanitarian contributions. Mr. Cross, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Matthews is here with the quarterly reports. Corella Matthews entered, her own success evident in her confident stride. Their professional partnership had flourished over the decade, her legal brilliance complementing his strategic mind. The numbers exceed projections, she said, placing a tablet on his desk. The Community Development Program has transformed 12 urban areas this year alone. The Youth Education Initiative has a 97% success rate. Adrian nodded as he scanned the data. Corella pulled up another file. I thought you might be interested. Celeste is up for parole next month. Denied. I assume? He asked. Of course, Corella replied. Her behavior in prison has been problematic. 3 incidents of attempting to manipulate younger inmates into smuggling contraband. The parole board wasn't impressed. Adrian's expression remained unchanged. A decade hadn't softened his stance on betrayal. Maxwell, he inquired, still serving his 20-year sentence. Corella noted. He tried starting an investment scheme within the prison, got caught, and they added 5 more years to his term. Old habits die hard. What about the others? He asked. Glimmer was released last year after serving 5 years. She's now working as a shopping mall security guard in New Jersey. No one will hire her for anything involving financial responsibility. Rowena is still in hiding in South America. Interpol is keeping tabs on her. She's working under an alias as a tour guide, telling stories to tourists instead of destroying lives with rumors. And Melody, now known as Susan Mitchell, is the assistant manager at that diner in Ohio, still single and still trying to rebuild her life. Adrian stood and walked to the window. Below, construction crews worked on his latest project, a revolutionary green housing complex that would provide affordable homes while setting new standards for environmental responsibility. A message arrived from Ashes, who was still running her consulting business on the island. Her network had grown. She had become quite influential in regional development. She asks about you occasionally, Adrian noted, a slight softening in his expression as Viper reminded him that his usual Christmas bonus was on its way. A notification popped up on his desk screen, a news alert about Celeste. She had written another appeal letter, claiming rehabilitation, attached to a prison photo showing a woman aged beyond her years, her former beauty and confidence replaced by institutional drabness. She still wrote to him monthly, each letter going directly into the file. Adrian's voice held no emotion. She claims to understand now, to have changed. Do you believe her? He asked Corella. Understanding doesn't erase consequences, she replied. His phone buzzed with a message from the community center where he taught weekend classes in architecture and business ethics. A student had won a national design competition using the principles he had taught. Your revenge changed more than just their lives, Corella noted. Not revenge, justice, Adrian corrected. Revenge is emotional and personal. What I did was restore balance. They chose deception, manipulation, and cruelty. They now faced the natural consequences of those choices. A young intern knocked and entered, carrying preliminary sketches for a new project. Sir, I've revised the community center designs as you suggested, the young man said. Adrian spent the next hour reviewing the plans, teaching, and guiding. This was his true legacy, not the destruction of those who had wronged him, but the construction of something meaningful in the aftermath. Later that evening, in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, Adrian reviewed an old file, photos of that day at the resort, news clippings documenting their fall, prison records tracking their descent. His phone buzzed with a message from Maxwell's prison account. I understand now what you are, what you always were. We thought the architect was your true face. We were blind. Adrian archived the message without replying. Maxwell's realizations had come a decade too late to matter. A video call then came in from the islands. Ash's weathered face appeared on screen. The serpent has built quite a nest, she observed, looking at his surroundings. Different from that day, you walked into my shop seeking allies. The foundation had to be destroyed before something better could be built. And do those who betrayed you still haunt your dreams? They're not ghosts, Adrian replied. Ghosts require emotional attachment. They're just cautionary tales now. After the call, Adrian accessed the prison systems file on Celeste. Her latest psychiatric evaluation noted persistent difficulty accepting responsibility and continued attempts to manipulate through superficial charm. Nothing had changed. He opened a hidden safe behind an award plaque and removed a worn leather journal. His grandmother's last words were written on the first page. Find happiness, Adrian. Promise me. Below it, he had written his response. I found truth instead. A message from Viper appeared on his phone. Kids showing promise at the center. Raw talent. Just like you had. Want to help mentor him. Adrian smiled slightly. This is how real change happens, through guidance and opportunity, not through revenge or destruction. His evening news alerts brought updates on the others whose lives had intersected with his revenge. Glimmer had been fired from her security job for trying to scam elderly shoppers. Decades of consequences hadn't taught her honesty. Rowena's cover in Argentina had been blown after she tried selling fake travel packages to tourists. Old habits, indeed, die hard. Melody had attempted to restart her social media account, but her past was quickly exposed. The internet never truly forgets. A letter arrived from Celeste's prison chaplain, seeking a character reference for her parole hearing. Adrian marked it and returned it unopened. A decade of claimed reformation didn't erase her true nature. His final appointment of the day was with a young architect who had risen through his mentorship program. The boy reminded Adrian of himself at that age, driven, focused, and unwilling to accept limitations. "Sir, why did you start this program? You could have just enjoyed your success," the young man asked. Adrian touched the scar above his eyebrow. "Success without purpose is as hollow as revenge without justice. I learned that lesson thoroughly." Later that night, on his penthouse balcony overlooking the city lights, Adrian reflected on the decade that had passed since he revealed his true nature to those who underestimated him. They remained caught in their own webs, serving time, hiding from consequences, struggling to rebuild shattered lives. He had moved forward, building something meaningful from the ashes of their betrayal. His grandmother had wished for his happiness. He had found something more valuable. Purpose. His phone buzzed with a final message for the day, a student's success story from the community center. This was his real victory, not the destruction of his enemies, but the construction of a lasting legacy. The hawk that had once watched his humiliation at the resort might have symbolized his freedom then, but true freedom, he had learned, came not from flying away but from building higher. A decade later, the serpent hadn't just survived. It had transcended its own revenge. Justice had been served, cold and complete, but justice was only the beginning. What came after? The building, the teaching, the leading. Those were the real triumphs. Those who had betrayed him remained trapped in cells of steel or in the cells of their own making. He had built foundations instead of walls, created opportunities instead of destroying them. The architect had designed more than buildings. The fighter had fought more than battles. The man they once mocked as powerless had become a force for change. A decade had proven that revenge was finite, but legacy was eternal, and Adrian Cross's legacy was just beginning. In his private study, he opened his grandmother's journal one last time. Below his decade-old response about finding truth, he added a final line. "Truth showed me justice. Justice taught me purpose. Purpose brought me peace." The serpent had done more than strike. It had risen, and that rise would continue, not through destruction, but through creation, not through revenge, but through opportunity, not through tearing down, but through building up. The next decade beckoned, full of possibilities, and Adrian Cross, the man they once mocked as powerless, now stood ready to seize them all, not for revenge, not anymore, but for something far more powerful: legacy.